Hello and welcome to my tutorial. This one is on text, and AutoCAD offers two types of text. They call them the multi-line and the single line. I like to think of them as the simple text and the rich text. So I'm going to start with the single, and it starts by asking for a screen position, so I'll just click it there, and then it wants the height. You can actually just drag this line down and click to give you a height, but I'm going to put in 1, and then it wants the rotation angle, and it's set to 0 at the moment, so I'm just going to hit return and it'll stay as 0, and then enter some text. And with the single line, if you hit the return twice, it finishes it. Now it looks like there's no text there, and that's because this screen, the default screen for a new drawing, is very, very wide. If I just measure the distance, it's 4,500 units, and because I've entered the text as 1 for 1 meter, this is 4.5 kilometers wide. But if I draw a box around where I just drew it, you can see it's there, it's been selected, and it's called text. So I'll use the mouse and just zoom in on that, and there we are. So it's got a height of 1, rotation 0, and not much else. And that's the thing about the properties for single line text, it doesn't give you an awful lot of properties. If I select it again and I'll leave it at 1, so I'll hit return and add my text and hit the return button, and again, and then twice to finish. It actually does 3 lines of text or more, but they're all separate. There's 3 lines of text there, they're not joined together, and I can grab one and move it around. The Mtext, or multi-line text, asks you to draw a sort of boundary box. So it wants 2 clicks on the screen, and then you add your text. And if I was just to hit return twice, it will just give me 2 lines because it's multi-line. So you either have to hit close text editor or just touch the screen outside, and it's closed it. And this is called Mtext, that's the entity name, while single line text is just text. And it gives us a few more properties to play with. And we'll look at those in a sec. But if I click it again and just do some multi-line text, I'll close it up here this time. If I click on it, they're all together, it's one single entity, while these were 3, which is why it's called multi-line text. I like to call it rich text because you can change parts of the text. You can change the colours of a few letters, underline, you can make some parts of it bigger and smaller, and it's still all together. Well, you can't do that with simple text, single line text. And that's why I recommend you use the Mtext over the single line. Whatever you drew last will be set by default in the top box there. So once you select single line, it's got a blue line under it, which sort of means 1 line, I guess. So once you've set it to multi-line, you don't have to keep using this menu. You can just hit the A up there. And it has some nice properties. We can put a text frame around it, and we can give it a background mask, which is really handy. And you have to tick that. And the offset factor is the sort of margin around the text for the mask, so set it to 1.5 and give it a colour. and you've got your mask. The background mask offset factor has to be between 1 and 5. 1 is the tightest around the text, so it's really pulled that in, except for this width, because I can actually adjust the width of my bounding box. But if I justify it to middle center, and this mask is why it's great to use for tree tags and annotation boxes on our survey drawings. Normally I would just use the use drawing background color box. If you tick that, it ignores this color and just uses the background color, so it'll just be white, so it'll cover whatever it's on top. And if that's, you know, part of a drawing and tree crowns and things, it helps your tree tag to stand out. Once you actually double tap it to edit it, you get this box at the top coming up, which sort of expands on some of these properties and just makes access to them easier. For instance, you've got a little ruler which you can switch on and off. But yes, if we select some text within it, we can give them a separate colour. We can underline, bold, and change the size. And you can't do this with the single line text. And this is why I call it the rich text, because it has all these lovely options. One last thing to quickly look at is the columns. Now by default, AutoCAD gives you dynamic columns, which can be a bit confusing because it likes to try and think for you and thinks, oh, you want that split in half, so I'll do that for him, and it can be really annoying. So I tend to select no columns, and then I'll just copy this. If I want more Mtext, I'll just copy the one I've done, so all that is copied with it. You can set a system variable at the start of your drawing. You can type in Mtext column, and 0 means no columns, 2 puts it back to dynamic columns. So if I do some now, oops, that's gone back to dynamic. If I type in Mtext column and put in 0 and then draw some text, by default we got no columns. But I always forget to do that at the start of a drawing. Once you set it for a drawing, it stays set, but then it resets on your next drawing, so you've got to keep doing it. So it's just easier to, if you know, if it's a problem, do it on, set it to none on one, and then just copy the text. And I'll load up the demo meters drawing, which you can download from the description, and I shall draw a little tree tag. And this is where I tend to use the background mask, and I normally go about 1.1 on the offset, and I'll use the screen background color, and then just adjust it a bit smaller. And once I've done one, once I've got it all set up, I'll just copy that to all my trees and then adjust the text. There's no need to keep using that each time. Just copy and paste. It saves a lot of time. And you might prefer to have a little box around it. Or maybe you'd like to have a box and a nice pretty mask. But you do have to be careful about getting too pretty. Keep things simple, I say. If I now load in the demo millimeters drawing, which is the same sort of drawing just in millimeters, and I do my Mtext tag T56, it's disappeared, but it hasn't really. It is actually there. The problem is I didn't check what the drawing size was, so it's drawn it 1 unit high, but that's actually 1 millimeter high, so you can hardly see it. If you keep zooming in enough, you will find it. So all you need to do is change the height to 1000 to get your meter high text. And that's why it's a good idea to know what your units for the drawing are before you start playing around with it. And the first tutorial, I believe, deals with units, but ideally you just measure something. Now that's saying 6,686, so that must be millimeters. It can't be meters because that's nearly 7 kilometers wide for that road. And yeah, otherwise it all works the same. It's just the height you need to be aware of. The mask ratio still works the same. If I set it to 1.2, it still does the same. You don't have to worry about millimeters on that, on the offset. If I just go back to the blank drawing one we did, if you've accidentally been using the single line text and you meant to use the Mtext, you can convert it into Mtext. You just type in text to Mtext and it asks you to select the object, enter, and it's now become Mtext. If you've done hundreds of tags in single line text and you want to convert them to Mtext, and assuming you've done them on a layer, you can isolate the layer, select them, and convert them all in one go. So it's handy to remember that. Well, we just need to talk about annotative text, because you can see the properties have that option, and also there's the style option. Annotative text is sort of a system where AutoCAD scales the text automatically to maintain a size, no matter what sheet size and scale you use. It's probably more useful for where you're using multiple scales and sheet sizes. I don't use it, and to be honest, it can be more trouble than it's worth setting it up and managing it. And I do know that many professionals don't actually use it either. So I would say don't use it, but of course it's up to you to explore it. As a general rule, to make sure text is readable, because you need to make sure that when your plans are printed out you can actually see the text and that it's not too big and annoying. As a sort of general rule, you should be looking to make your text height between 0.5 meter and maybe 1.2 meters in height. if it's a small site, just like a garden of a single house, you'd probably be looking at 1/2 meter text height, because you'll be probably printing that out on an A3 sheet at a scale of 1 to 100 or 1 to 200, and 1/2 meter is quite large and clear. For something like A1 or AO sheet, 1 to 300, 1 to 400 scale, you're looking at 1 meter in height for the text, so that when it's printed out, it'll be readable. You can actually see the text, because otherwise it'll be just really small, sort of like that, and you won't be able to see it. And for anything bigger, like AO sheet 1 to 500 scale, 1 to 600 maybe, if you're going higher than 1 to 600, you should really be looking at multiple sheets. But in those situations, 1 meter to 1.2 meters in height, I find is the best size. So generally, A2 drawings or A1 with the lower scales, 1 to 200, 0.75 of a meter. It's going to be trial and error. You're going to sort of find out what works. But what you certainly wouldn't do is have something that big, 2 meters. You know, these will be, if I use the match properties, you know, they're just covering up too much of the drawing, and they're annoying, because on a printed A3 sheet that would be really in your face a bit too much. So if you're not confident with annotative and you're a sort of beginner, then just make sure it's switched off. And I believe that's it. I think we've covered everything I wanted to cover. Yep, so let's get on to the next tutorial, which will be out due very soon. Thank you very much. Bye.